Welcome back. Welcome back online as well. Here we are trying to start as on time as we can, and we're pretty darn close. One note before we get started. If you're here, I printed out in the back if you're interested in a Doctor of Ministry and Disability in Ministry. We have another cohort that's starting up in January. All the information is on this. If you're online, just go to Western Theological Seminary, find the Center for Disability in Ministry, and under Programs you can find this document as well. I'm going to remind you again the invitation to participate in our Nurturing Children with Disabilities grant. Just had a wonderful conversation with Megan about that whole thing. You'll end up having about 10 people from your congregation coming. At least a couple of them should be children. At least one of them should be a child with disabilities, and you'll participate in this process where you'll be with other churches who are asking the same kind of questions, and you'll get some direction. And honestly, we don't know what's going to come on the other side because we're all going to learn together, and we can't do that without your participation. But right now, for the next little bit, you're going to hear from Kevin O'Farrell, who you met earlier with Joni and Friends, and he's going to introduce you to Claudia Aguirre. So, Kevin, I worked all afternoon on that. Aguirre. Decent? So.
You'll have to ask our friends from the Hispanic Ministries program on the adequacy. And Ben did ask me about 5 times on how to pronounce it, so he's improving each time. Thank you for the introduction, and I did want to start by just saying thank you to Western Theological Seminary and the Center for Disability and Ministry for your hospitality and invitation to participate in this symposium. It is my first time to the seminary as well as to Western Michigan, and I have been pleasantly surprised by both. So it's been a great time. It's a beautiful area of the country, and it's been great to see some old friends here and as well make new friends here at the seminary. It really is a special place, and we're grateful to partner with you for this event. I will not be speaking on this keynote session. I am not from El Salvador, though I visited, so I'll be introducing Claudia Aguirre. But before I do that, I do want to talk a little bit about Joni and Friends and our international ministries. Joni and Friends is privileged to be one of the sponsors for this event. It's a great privilege to be partnering for a symposium that's really looking to impact the local church, empower people for ministry, and to work with people who have a shared mission, etc. Joni and Friends is a disability ministry that is based in California and was founded in 1979. Most people know it through our founder, Joni Eareckson Tada, who I will talk about in a couple of seconds. The mission of Joni and Friends is to mobilize the global church to evangelize, disciple, and serve people living with disabilities. At the heart of this mission is the gospel of Jesus Christ and our conviction that God's love, power, and calling rests on our friends living with disabilities. It is this biblical insight that changed the life of our founder, Joni Eareckson Tada, when she had a diving accident at 17, which left her a quadriplegic. In the months after her accident, she really wrestled with what God was doing in her life. While there were some challenges with rehabilitation, with gaining some functionality back, the real challenges she had were psychological and spiritual. It was the question of, I now live with a disability. Everything that I thought I was going to do doesn't seem possible. Does God have a future for me? Does God have hope for me? Does God have a calling for me? And it was during her hospital rehabilitation that friends shared with her this good news of the gospel, and she prayed the famous prayer, God, if I can't die, then show me how to live. She said, I want to grasp the purposes of God in my life and live in a way that would honor him. And so fast forward 50 years from that time, she has written over 40 books on the Bible, faith, and life with a disability. She has a radio program that's broadcast on over 1,500 outlets, a daily radio giving biblical encouragement for people who go through hardship. She's an accomplished artist. I know art is a big thing here, and that's really how she got famous to begin with, because during her rehabilitation, she learned to paint with a paintbrush between her teeth, and she makes these beautiful masterpieces that I am continue to be impressed by. And also part of her ministry is that she started Joni and Friends in 1979, so that there would be an organization that's dedicated to empowering the local church and providing practical care to people living with disabilities in the local church. And so Joni and Friends exists to proclaim this good news and to train churches and communities to be places of welcome, belonging, and hope. We also strive to offer practical care to people living with disabilities in the places where they are. And that's done through a number of programs that Claudia is going to share about in just a few minutes. This is my moment to say that there is a table in the back. We have brochures that talk about those programs in detail, as well as a Joni storybook where you can learn more about her story and testimony. I brought a lot of things from California with me, and that means that after this session, you're free to raid the table and take those things with you. I do not want to take them back with me. Just leave the info sheet that has people's information. That would not be cool to take. Same with the tablecloth. Please don't take the tablecloth. But other than those things, you're free to take the books and the resources that are there. I think that's all I wanted to say about Joni. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say, this is why I have notes, is that Joni and Friends does have 26 offices across the United States. And so I know people here have come from different locations. And so please go on our website and you can see all the different area ministry offices that we have. The closest one is in Chicago, which isn't too far away. And we do a number of family retreats throughout Michigan as well. So you're free to look for those things and live your best life. Joni and Friends is also grateful to serve in over 50 countries around the world, which includes El Salvador, and this leads to the segue to introducing Claudia Aguirre. I actually wanted to share briefly before introducing Claudia herself to how we got partnered with Claudia and to start doing the ministry the way we're doing it internationally. Joni and Friends has been serving internationally for a number of years, since the early 90s or something like that. When I was a kid, they started doing stuff internationally. But they found that they had some challenges as they continued to serve internationally in countries year after year. So in 2019, Joni and Friends was only serving in 20 countries, and they found they had some challenges that they were struggling to overcome. One of which was that as we continued to serve in these places, it didn't really change the culture of the places we lived in ways that we wanted to see long term. Because the ministry was centralized in the United States, it was often focused on short-term teams from the US going into those countries, doing some remarkable care, and going back. We always partnered with local teams to do this work, but it seemed quite focused on our initiatives and our strategy and our ways of thinking. It also meant that as Americans, we can all admit this, we make some stupid mistakes culturally as we do this ministry as well. We miss things and intricacies about how we can minister in a certain place. So in 2019, Joni and Friends made the decision that we want to empower our friends and these local leaders to do ministry in their own context. If Joni and Friends is about the friends that we partner with in ministry, we needed to give them real authority and I guess I'm blanking on the word right now because I too am tired. It's been a good day so far. Empowerment to create the direction and make the relationships and connect with churches as a representative of Joni and Friends in that place. And so we connected, signed up 6 leaders at that time. These were in India, East Africa, Eastern Europe, South America, and Peru and Brazil, and finally Claudia in El Salvador. And it's incredible to see the way that Claudia's ministry has developed, even in the face of COVID. Because you think about this, empowerment happened in 2019, and through the years of 2020 onward, you've seen a real ministry develop that is inspiring and transformative and has much to teach us about the theme of today, disability and evangelism. And so with that, I want to introduce Claudia, who's going to be presenting virtually for her breakout session. Claudia Aguirre is the International Regional Manager of Latin America and Mexico with Joni and Friends. She lives in El Salvador, and a fun fact is that she's fluent in Spanish, English, and French. Claudia lives with a disability after a diving accident at the age of 11, which she'll share more about in this session. Claudia has a heart for disability ministry and is now fulfilling her purpose by sharing her testimony, spreading the message of God's love and hope to those who are suffering, as well as raising awareness about love and inclusion for people living with disabilities. I have been privileged to visit the ministry in El Salvador, and it truly is inspiring in a place where we see the fullness of God's kingdom and the ways that people can come together to live lives of mutuality and service. So please welcome me or please join me, don't welcome me, please join me in welcoming Claudia for this session.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? And can you see me? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that beautiful introduction. I wish I could see everybody, but this is the magic of technology that I'm able to share from my own country in El Salvador and be able to speak at this symposium. I want to thank the Western Theological Seminary for giving me the opportunity to be here this afternoon with you. And I also want to thank Kevin O'Farrell. So, as Kevin shared, I am from El Salvador. My native language or my mother tongue is Spanish. So I want to apologize and excuse myself in case I make any mistakes. Don't pay attention to that, but I'll try to do my best presenting in English, which is not easy, but I'll try to do my best. So I want to start by sharing my screen. Let's pray that technology is good for us today. So can you guys see my screen? Yes? Okay, perfect. All right, so this afternoon, I want to talk to you about the Luke 14 banquet and lessons for disability ministry in El Salvador. And I will talk a little bit more about what is the Luke 14 banquet and what lessons have we learned, but I want to start by putting all of us in context. So I mentioned that I am from El Salvador, and I've been repeating this a few times because I'm very proud to be Salvadorian. So perhaps some of you have already visited my country. For others, maybe you've heard some things, hopefully good things. But unfortunately, when people hear about El Salvador, they tend to think of the civil war that we faced in the 80s, or they think of delinquency and violence and gangs, which is a reality, but there are also some beautiful facts about my country that I want to share with you. So first, El Salvador is the smallest country in Central America and the most densely populated. Actually, El Salvador is the smallest country in the whole continent of America, apart from a few islands, but we are the smallest country. So I have here a map of Central America, and you can see this is my country, and I don't live in San Salvador, in the capital city. I live in a department next to San Salvador, which is called La Libertad, the Liberty. Also, a fun fact is that El Salvador's nickname is the land of volcanoes. So we have a lot of volcanoes in the country, And there are like 7 that are active. So right now on the east side of the country, and a volcano is active, and you can see the I don't know what the word is, but like the smoke coming out of the volcano. So we are used to earthquakes and volcanoes that are active, but that is part of our daily life. Also, El Salvador is a surfer's paradise. We have some of the best beaches in the world, and the waves are considered internationally one of the best for the surfers. So we have a lot of people coming from Europe and from the States just to surf and participate in competitions. We are also internationally known for our good coffee beans. So whenever you come to El Salvador, you have to drink some of our coffee. And this is the fun fact that I love the most. Our name, which in Spanish is pronounced El Salvador, if you translate it into English, it translates to the Savior. So my country has the name of our Lord and Savior, the Savior, which is something that I consider nice. Okay, so these are nice things, right? But now let's go to the main topic of our presentation, which is what about disability in El Salvador? Because that's my reality in the country. This is where I live, and this is what I see every day. And I could extend this reality to the other countries of Latin America. So, what about disability? So, I'll start first with a few statistics. And I have linked this with disability, but also poverty. El Salvador, as the rest of countries in Central America, are poor countries. So 35% of the population live under the poverty line. And I put this picture here of this little girl because this is what you see when you come to El Salvador. Yes, in the capital city, you're going to see big buildings and highways and beautiful houses. But if you go into the rural areas, which is the majority of the country, like 80% of the country is rural, this is what you're going to see. Poverty, people without anything to eat, children with nothing to wear, no shoes, no water, no electricity, no access to education. This is the reality of poverty in El Salvador. Now add to this disability. Now around 20% of the population live with a disability. And when I say disability, I'm talking about intellectual disability, physical disability, and all other types of disabilities, which could even be invisible disabilities. But if you link disability and poverty, that is a big problem. I'm saying problem because there's something that we need to address, not because disability is a problem, but because of what arises from this link between poverty and disability. Now, around 7%, almost 8% of people have severe disabilities. That is multiple disabilities like cerebral palsy or people that have autism and could also be blind and deaf. And 1 out of 10 children have a disability. So in this slide, you can see these are numbers, right? So it's kind of difficult to put a face to this, like to understand exactly what do we really see in our country when we go to the rural areas, when we go to communities where nobody else goes, and when we go to a small house, and even the name house is too big for the place where these people live. I mean, it is difficult to imagine this just by looking at the numbers. So I want to put a face to these numbers. And I have a video that let's pray and hope that will run smoothly. I'm gonna turn my camera off so that you can hopefully see the video and my internet works well. So I'll put the beginning of the video and perhaps someone can let me know if you can hear and see everything well. So what is like living with a disability in El Salvador, specifically in the rural area, what I just mentioned, disability and poverty. Okay, so here we go. Okay.
Just 9 miles south of San Salvador.
Okay, I'm gonna pause here. Can you guys see the video and can you hear it well? Okay, awesome. All right, so I'll start again.
Just 9 miles south of San Salvador, hidden deep within the mountains, lives the Guzman family and their daughter Daniela.
Bueno, pues mi nombre es Lorena.
My name is Lorena. We are a family of 5. My 2 children, my husband, and me.
Y Daniela, ella tiene,
Daniela is 11.
ella es con discapacidad.
She's disabled.
Tiene parálisis.
She has hemiparesis.
En las manitos, ella parece.
Her hands shake when she tries to write or take food into her mouth. She can't go upstairs by herself.
Brincar o correr.
She can't jump or run.
No puede. Ella donde pierde el
If she loses her balance, she just falls.
las manos. Yesenia tiene.
Yesenia is
13
13.
Ella
She's
va
in
a
8th grade.
Ella es.
She's my right hand.
Ella es la que le ayuda bastante también.
She helps Daniela a lot because
Yo, sinceramente, no
I can't read that well.
puedo leer mucho. Y ella es la que me le ayuda.
She helps her when I can't understand something.
Se nos complica bastante
Going out is complicated.
para salir de aquí para
If we go out to school or to our therapies.
terapias. Vaya, pues, Daniela.
I wake Daniela up at 4 a.m.
En la escuela ella
School
empieza
begins at 7 a.m.
siete.
When we go out, I always take her hand because I'm afraid she may fall down and hit her head.
Daniela's trip to school starts with an hour-and-a-half walk, much of it along dirt roads and precarious steps. Most days, Daniela gets tired from walking, and Lorena must carry her to reach the bus stop. Lorena has made extensive efforts to provide her daughter with an education. Unfortunately, she is bullied by classmates and discriminated against by her teacher.
Los niños
The kids ignored her.
decían que era una niña loca,
They told her she was crazy,
que era una niña enferma,
that she was sick,
que era una niña enferma.
that she was a cripple, and that she was a waste.
Ella lloraba.
She cried and cried,
Ella me decía,
and she asked me, Mom, why can't I walk?
"¿Por qué los niños no me quieren?"
Why don't the kids like me?
Me dijo que ella
Her teacher told me
nunca va a aprender.
she will never learn to read or write.
Me dijo, mire, hágalo.
It doesn't matter what you do because she will remain like that.
A mí me dolía,
It hurt a lot,
pero yo no lloraba.
but I didn't cry in front of her.
Yo solo le pedía a Dios
I asked God to give me the
que
strength.
me diera fuerza que
I need to fight for my children.
Okay. I hope that you guys were able to see the video of Daniela. Did it work well? Yes? Okay, so, well, I hope that you guys were able to see and put a face to what I was just talking about, poverty and disability. So I remember that when I met Daniela, which was like maybe 5 years ago, we invited her to one of our family retreats, which is a program that I will be speaking about in a few minutes. So I remember that I saw this little girl who was about maybe 7 when I met her, and she had her dad holding her in one arm and her mother holding her other arm, and I saw the difficulty on how she was walking, but she had the most beautiful smile. She had those big brown eyes and that beautiful black hair with braids. Um, and I just saw her, and I could definitely just see Jesus in her face. And I just fell in love with her. And I started talking to her parents, and they were sharing with me all of the things that they face and all of that they have to go through just to take care of Daniela and just to provide to her what she needs as maybe uh, uh, food or medicines or all of the things that a girl like her need. And then when we made this video that Joni and Friends brought the visual media services team to record Daniela's story, I remember them telling me that it was even difficult for them who don't have a disability to climb up that mountain just to reach Daniela's house. Now let's imagine the difficulty for her and for her mom, you saw in the video, just to be able to go to school. And when she gets there, she gets bullied by her classmates. So when I saw the video for the first time, I was crying. And when I see the video and when I think of her, it is impossible for me not to cry because that is the reality of El Salvador. That is the reality of people with disabilities that live in those rural areas where they are forgotten from society. And when I mean society, I mean the government, I talk about people in general. And unfortunately, I have to say that sometimes, even from church, from Christian people that don't see this, that perhaps have never imagined that there are people living in these conditions. So that is why we need to speak on behalf of Daniela and other people like her who have a disability and that are not seen, not because they don't exist, but because no one goes there to visit them or to offer them some kind of help. So on this slide, I just want to mention some of the challenges that people with disabilities face here in El Salvador. There is no access to education. I know that maybe in countries like the US or maybe more developed countries, there is access to education. There are schools where there are teachers who have the skills required to know how to teach someone with an intellectual disability or with a physical disability, or they have special educators. We have in El Salvador, but the people that have access to special education are not people like Daniela. There is no access to health system. Unfortunately, for people with disabilities, there is no first, there is no empathy on the medical services or the doctors that could have empathy towards the parents or towards a person that has a disability. For them, it's just a patient, and it is a difficult patient. It is considered a complex case that they often don't like to assist or serve. There is no accessible transportation. Here in the country, you will never see an accessible bus or even with with cabs or with these other transportation companies that offer services through an app on your phone. When someone needs to be taken to the hospital or to a doctor appointment, these companies, when they see that it is someone that is on a wheelchair, they just I mean, they just don't stop, or they just tell the person, oh, I cannot put that chair on my car, it will scratch it. I mean, any excuse in order not to bring these people in their car and take them to wherever they need to be taken. Also, there is unequal employment opportunities. Yes, there is a law here in El Salvador that for every 25 employees, there should be one that has to have a disability. But unfortunately, companies and even, I mean, they could be big or small, they prefer to pay a fine instead of hiring people with disabilities. And that is the reality. Because before joining Joni and Friends, I used to work in a different organization. And I remember that I always wanted to force the company where I worked to, uh, to I mean, to what's the word? Comply with the law that for every 25 employees, we should have at least one. And I worked at a company where we were like 100 employees, and I was the only one that had a disability. But then I found out that the company preferred to pay whatever the government would obligate them to pay for not complying with the law instead of having people with disabilities. Why? Because maybe they think that it'll be a burden, they will have to invest more money, or just because they don't want to have people with disabilities around them or next to them. And then there's also the negative beliefs and attitudes. And this is something that maybe no education, no health system, no transportation, or unequal employment opportunities. Yes, this is our reality, but negative beliefs and attitudes, that's what hurts the most. And you could hear it on the video that I just presented, how Daniela suffered from bullying from her classmates and even from her own teacher, which is supposed to be the person that could defend her or at least raise her voice. But on the opposite, it was the person that told her mom that she was a waste, that she was never going to learn, and that she should just stay at home. And that is what people with disabilities have to face every day. Small, I mean, like children, young boys and girls, adults, everybody here with that has a disability. This is our reality, the negative beliefs and attitudes. And that's what, in the end, hurts more than not having an education or not being able to go to a hospital. The attitude of people, the lack of love, the lack of empathy, the lack of desire to help or to invite you to be part of society, this is what hurts the most. So now I want to share a little bit about my own testimony, because as Kevin was mentioning on the introduction that he made, I have a disability. So that is why when I talk about this, I can relate. Maybe the difference in my case is that I don't live in the rural area as Daniela. And I had an education. I have access to health system, and I've worked in a company. So let me share with you how my life with a disability is here. Maybe not in the rural area, but in a different, with a different perspective. So this is me at the age of 10. This is a picture where you could see me without a disability, a young 10-year-old girl full of life, with a smile on her face, with lots of dreams and with lots of enjoying her life. When I was little, I was very active and I loved doing all kinds of sports. I was very athletic. I used to do gymnastics. We were with my siblings. I have a brother and a sister. We used to go after school, we used to go to swim classes, we used to go to gymnastics with my sister. My brother, my sister, and I would go to tennis classes. And then at school, I will play basketball, volleyball, athleticism, you name it. If someone asked for someone that wanted to do some type of sport, I was the first one raising my hand and saying, I want to play whatever sport there was. I loved swimming. Of all of the sports that I did, swimming was my favorite. I remember that whenever we went to a club, or if, thank God, my dad, who worked a lot, was able to perhaps to go out and travel, I would always go. I'm sorry. The first thing that I would do is just see if there was a swimming pool, because that's what I love doing, swimming. So if someone would have asked me if I imagined or thought that I was going to live with a disability at the age of 11, that, I mean, I think that by 11, I had never seen someone with a disability, to be honest. I think I never saw someone in a wheelchair. Obviously, I did see like children with Down syndrome or some other disability, but to me, life was just a joy. But then on February 8th, 1990, I was having my swimming class at school. And it was like the best day ever at school. On Thursday, I used to have my swimming class. And we were there, and when the class finished, all of my classmates left because we had our our sports class after swimming. But I didn't want to leave the pool, so I stayed there with three of my other friends. So I told my three friends, girls, watch me, I'm gonna take a dive. And that's what I did. I took a dive and I hit the bottom of the pool with my head, and I instantly became paralyzed. Even though this was in 1990, which is like 34 years ago, I remember that day as if it was yesterday. When I close my eyes and when I think of that day, I remember everything. I never lost consciousness. I remember every single second that I was underwater. And I remember that my body becoming paralyzed instantly. And I wanted to get out of the water. And I wanted to move my arms and my legs just to be able to rise above water and be able to breathe. But my body just didn't respond. And I felt it was hours or minutes that I was underwater because I just started swallowing big amounts of water, and I couldn't stop. Like I couldn't close my throat, or I don't know, something happened, and I just continued swallowing big amounts of water. And I remember that there was a moment when I just said, I am going to die. I knew that right on that second I was going to die because I just couldn't hold my breath underwater anymore. So I remember that I started saying the prayer, Heavenly Father, hallowed be Thy name, be Thy will be done on earth and in heaven. I remember starting praying, and like I hadn't even finished praying when the girls that were with me jumped into the water and they took me out. And then everything became chaotic. And I'm not going to go into that because it'll take more than the time that I have to share with you my presentation. But just to fast forward, I was in the IC unit, in the intensive care unit, for 2 months. I had a tracheotomy. I couldn't breathe on my own, and the doctors told my family that I had broken my neck, that I had broken three vertebrae from my neck, and that I was paralyzed from my neck down, and that I was never going to be able to walk or talk because I was going to depend on a ventilator for the rest of my life, and that I was just going to be laying in bed until my life was going to be over. So when the doctor told my parents that, and the first what's the word, operation that the doctors did on me, the first surgery that lasted like 8 hours, when the doctor came out of the emergency room and told my parents that diagnosis, my mom told the doctor, crying and about to just faint because of the impression of what he told them. She just said, "But I have faith." And the doctor just said, "Well, someone has to have faith." And he just turned around and left. There, my family crying without understanding what was happening. So then I was able to go to the US thanks to the help of some American missionaries. I went to Richmond, Virginia for my rehab for 6 months. And that is also a miracle that I cannot explain right now, but we didn't have to pay a cent because my father had zero money on the bank because he had spent everything on the 2 months that I was in the intensive care unit. But somehow God brought two angels into our lives, two American missionaries that did everything in order for me to go to a hospital in Richmond, Virginia. And that's where I received my rehab. And this is me after about 9 months after my accident, on a wheelchair, without being able to use my hands, without being able to walk. And that's when I came back to El Salvador. And that's when I started to live a new life with a disability. And yes, I did go back to school. I could go and see a doctor. But the beliefs and attitudes, which is what I was mentioning before, that's what affected me the most. And unfortunately, I have to say that something that affected me a lot was the way that Christian people saw disability. This was back in the 90s. I remember that there were, I don't know, hundreds of people that went to the hospital to pray for me, or people that would come to my house, and they were from different churches, and they would come here to my house and they would pray and they would lay hands on me. And I remember them telling me, even screaming and yelling, "Claudia, get up from that chair, start walking, God has healed you." And when I tried to get up and walk and move my hands, and when I saw that nothing was happening, that I was still the same girl that you see on this picture without the use of her hands and legs, and I did all of my effort, and I tried to walk, but nothing happened. And then when the person that was praying for me would see that, they would just say, "You don't have enough faith. You're not healed because you don't have the faith that it takes." And then I would just get frustrated and I would cry, and that lasted for years and years. And that haunted me for decades. And that's what I experienced. Um, and like I said, unfortunately, on the religious side of what people think, used to think, but there are some people that still thinks that people with disabilities are not healed because they don't have the faith that God asks us to have, or because in our countries in Latin America, most people think that when a child is born with a disability, that is because of the sins of their parents, because it is a curse, or because they did something wrong. And there are so many beliefs that are just negative and they're so wrong. And we need to understand that God has a purpose in disability. And that's my experience with Joni and Friends. So in 2009, when I was still being haunted by all of these thoughts and I was a Christian, all of my family, we were Christians, but on my mind, I still had the idea that I was not healed because I didn't have faith. So then I met the ministry, Joni and Friends. I had read her book like 1 year after my accident. Someone offered me her book and I read it. And Joni changed my life. I just admire this woman that had accomplished so much and that had discovered the purpose that God had in her disability. So I was invited to this first family retreat with my mom and dad, and that changed my life. I remember that when I got there, I was, it's a long story, but I wasn't even invited to the family retreat. I didn't even know that there was going to be a family retreat in El Salvador. But Joni came and she was going to share her testimony at an event. And then someone, I didn't know who it was, contacted me and asked, "Are you Claudia? You have a story similar to Joni, so we want to invite you to share your testimony with her." So I went, and that's how I found out about the family retreat. And they just said, "Oh, come and you'll enjoy this time, and we want you to see what this is like." And I remember when I got there and when I saw so many other children like me, or adults or young people like me, in a wheelchair, blind, with Down syndrome, with all of these disabilities, that's the moment that God opened my eyes. And and that's the moment, oh, I'm sorry. That's the moment that it was like God telling me, "Claudia, this is the purpose of your accident. This is where I need you to be, around these people like you that have a disability, but don't know me or have never heard about me, and that they need my love." So that's when I said, "God, here I am. Take me wherever you want to take me." So that's when my life changed, and that's how I got involved in the Joni and Friends ministry. And as Kevin said, now it's been more than 15 years since I've been part of Joni and Friends. And in 2019, right before the pandemic started, that's when I was considered to be the regional manager. And I oversee all of these countries of Central America and Mexico. And now I am fulfilling and understanding that God has a purpose in disability. Now I understand that I am in a wheelchair. I cannot move my hands, and I have a lot of difficulties. I mean, living with quadriplegia is not easy. I've been suffering in these last few months from chronic pain and all sorts of things that come along with a disability such as quadriplegia. But now I understand that this is the reason why God hasn't healed me, because he wants to use me in a wheelchair to be able to go and share his message to other people that are also suffering. So thank God, I am not haunted by these thoughts anymore that I don't have faith or that my parents maybe did something wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that God doesn't make any miracles. He does. And if he wanted to, and if it's in his will, of course I could get up and walk. But right now, that's not his will. His will for me and his purpose for me is to be able to talk and share my testimony and be able to be a voice and move the church and the society in a wheelchair. So that's what I'm doing now, and that's my passion now. And I know that God is using people around the world with and without disabilities so we can touch the hearts of society and most importantly, the heart of the church. So what do we do in El Salvador with regards to our disability ministries here in El Salvador and in the region? First, we have the Beyond Suffering course that Joni and Friends provide. And this is specifically, well, Kevin can talk a lot about Beyond Suffering as he oversees this, but this is a course where you can understand the biblical perspective of disability. And it is a program that pastors and leaders and everyone who wants to understand what is the God way, the way God sees disability and the way that we should see disability here in El Salvador. Like I said, most pastors and leaders still have the perspective that disability is a sin or a problem. And if you come to El Salvador, you will see that churches are not accessible to begin with. If I want to go to a church, it is very likely that it will not be accessible. So what we want is to change the perspective and to change the vision of the church and have them understand that the body of Christ is not full or it's not complete until we bring people with disabilities into the church. Another program that we have, and we can see here a picture of a family and with this girl in a wheelchair with their red t-shirts with the Joni and Friends logo in front. We host international family retreats, which are camps where we invite the whole family. And that's the camp, the retreat that I attended back in 2009 that changed my life. So we host these camps and we invite people with disabilities to a time of respite, a time where they can just enjoy fun activities, but most importantly, where they can have an encounter with God. We have the parents with leaders, women and men leaders, doing devotionals and doing just sharing stories, their experiences. And it is beautiful to see how the life of a family can change just in 3 days when they can spend time with other families that are facing their same difficulties and where they can experience the love of our volunteers and our leaders. We also have our Wheels for the World program. And here you can see this picture of one of our volunteers. This is actually an American volunteer. Her name is Nicole. She is from Virginia, actually. And fun fact, she also is from Richmond. And she works at the hospital where I was in 1990, which is something that to me is like amazing. So she is there with here our little friend on a wheelchair, just receiving his wheelchair. We distribute approximately 500, 240, 250 chairs during each outreach that lasts for a week. And we do 3 outreaches here in El Salvador. So we are able to bless over 700 people with the gift of mobility by giving them a wheelchair or a pair of crutches or canes or walkers. But it's like our program says, it's not about the wheels. What we want is to share the gospel to people receiving a mobility device. So after giving them a wheelchair, we give them a Bible, we give them the book of Johnny, and we also share the gospel. And the majority of them accept Jesus into their lives for the first time. We also have the Johnny's house. And here we have a picture of Andre, who is one of our patients doing here on the picture, you can see him doing his physical therapy. We have this rehab center in the country, and we provide services for people with disabilities. And we also provide counseling to the parents, to the siblings, and we also have volunteers serving, and we just want to bring attention in a holistic way by providing services for their physical rehab, for their emotionally, spiritually, and in every sense, for the whole family. So this is a little something that we do here in El Salvador. We do much more, but these are like our main programs. So after I've spoken about my experience and the experience of people with disabilities in the rural areas and the programs that we do, what lessons have I learned from doing disability ministry in El Salvador? And I am going to name just a few because there are many lessons. But first, one lesson that I have learned is that to serve God is to serve others. And this is a reality. Sometimes we think that serving God is just going to church and serving our brothers and the people that we like and the people that we love. But to serve God is to serve others, even if it is difficult, even if it is people that might not look well, that might not smell good, or people that maybe when you first see them, they're not someone that you just want to go out and hug. But we need to serve these people, the people that nobody else serves. And I have here just a few pictures, 3 pictures of some of our volunteers at Family Retreat. We have here Margarita. She's actually the physician at Johnny's house, holding in her arms Fernando, a boy that has microcephaly. And I love this picture because this is what we do. I mean, we just love them and hug them. And we have here also one of our volunteers helping this little girl by giving her some water. We have here also other volunteers picking up in their arms those people that cannot walk. And when I see these pictures, I'm reminded of what Matthew 25, verses 35 to 36 says, which is, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." So I feel that what we do at Family Retreat and what we do in our programs and doing disability ministry is doing exactly what God tells us here to do. And in our context, in our reality in Latin America, it is not easy. It is not easy for young people to do this. It is not easy for pastors and leaders to understand that to accomplish what is said on these verses is to do exactly this, holding people in our arms, giving them food, helping them to get up and to just transfer them from one place to another. This is exactly what we need to do. And that is why to serve these people is the way that we are serving the Lord. Another lesson that I have learned is that people with disabilities who seem to be the weaker parts of the body are indispensable at church. Here in El Salvador, like I said, it is very unlikely, and I mean, you don't see people with disabilities at church. Well, it is even difficult to see people with disabilities in any other place, not even church, but let's talk about, I don't know, a mall or a shopping mall or anywhere. Because again, most people don't have transportation, they live in far places, so you don't see them. So when you think of that, some people think, well, it's because they are weak. I mean, why are we going to have people who they would think what can they bring to our church? How can they be part of the church? And some churches have disability ministries. But the perspective of these ministries is just like doing charity, right? So it's just like having them on a separate room, being just taken care of while the congregation is on a Sunday service, worshiping the Lord and serving and loving each other. But people with disabilities are excluded. They are separate from the rest of the congregation. And I want to share with you the story of one of the girls that we served, and that is part of our ministry. And her name is Marilyn. As you can see on this picture, Marilyn is a girl with Down syndrome. She is in her 20s. She is here holding her microphone. And you can see on this other picture on my right, she is wearing a beautiful dress because she dances for the Lord. And here in this picture on the middle, she's also wearing this beautiful dress in white and red. And she's next to me. And she is part of the worship ministry at her church. Thank God that there are churches in our country like the one that Marilyn attends. And the pastor has invited Marilyn to be part of the worship ministry at her church because people with disabilities have gifts and talents that are not the weaker parts of the congregation. They are indispensable in the congregation. And yes, perhaps Marilyn doesn't have the best singing voice. Maybe she forgets the lyrics when she is on the with the rest of the worship ministry, or maybe when she dances, she doesn't do it maybe as wonderfully or beautifully as someone else. But I know, and I always love to have this picture on my mind, that when Marilyn is singing or when she is dancing, I just think that God is smiling up in heaven, watching Marilyn and saying, that is Marilyn. She is my princess, and she is worshiping me with all of her heart. So I just love imagining God saying that about Marilyn. And I hope that we could all see that we can see this girl worshiping and dancing for the Lord, and she is indispensable at church. Another lesson that I have learned is that people with disabilities are an example that God's power is made perfect in weakness. And there's another story. And actually, Joni, when she came in 2009, she visited this young lady named Leonore. If you want to search on YouTube, you just have to put Finding Franklin, Joni and Friends, and there's a program about Franklin, a little boy that Joni also went to see when she was in 2009. But you will also see the video of Leonore. So Leonore, as you can see on this picture, she uses a wheelchair. She wears sunglasses because I'm gonna use the past. She was blind. She was affected by quadriplegia, and she had a syndrome that her body, with no explanation, used to be covered with wounds. Leonore was abandoned by her parents, and she was raised by her aunt. Here in El Salvador, it is very common that people with disabilities are used in the sense that since families don't have access to money and they don't have the resources, they use people with disabilities as an instrument to bring money into their homes. So it is very common to see on the streets beggars, people asking for money, and they have next to them someone in a wheelchair just to use them for people to provide money to them. And that was the case of Leonore. When Joni went to visit her, she lived in the worst circumstances that you can imagine. She lived in a dark room, alone. There were some other children living in that house, but Leonor was always alone in that dark bedroom. And when Joni went there, and you can, and I encourage you to search for the video on YouTube. It's called Finding Franklin. I encourage you to watch it. When Joni came to see Leonor, they went there and they donated a wheelchair. And Joni made all of the arrangements in advance so that someone could bring Leonor and take her to a shelter where she could be taken care of by people that would love her. But her aunt refused to give Leonor to these other people that were willing to take care of her. And when we found out about that, we were like wondering, why doesn't her aunt want Leonor to be living a better life? And we understood that they were using her to bring money to their house. People would go and visit Leonor on the conditions that she was living, just so that they can donate and bring money and bring food and bring whatever Leonor needed. But her aunts and her relatives didn't give anything of that to Leonor. They would use it just for them. And that is our reality in our country. So you can see this on this other picture. We invited Leonor to our family retreat a few times. She, I think, went to like 4 family retreats. And unfortunately, she passed away in 2020. We were in the middle of the pandemic, and you could say, oh, maybe she passed away because of the pandemic. But that's not the reality. She passed away because, unfortunately, she had so many wounds in her body, and her aunt never provided any type of, of attention to her. All of her wounds got infected, and she passed away because her whole body went into an infection. And I just cannot imagine how much Leonor suffered. And we were in the middle of the pandemic, so we couldn't go out and see her. So they just told us that she had passed away, and there was anything that we could do but pray that she hadn't suffered. And we now know that Leonor is with her glorified body, without any wound, without the isolation, and without the suffering that she experienced. But what's impacting about Leonor's life is that when she attended family retreat, she was an inspiration to all of us. She could not see, she could not walk, but she could talk and she could hear. And when we were next to her, and I'm gonna be honest, her wounds didn't smell good. But when you are in the disability ministry, I don't know, maybe God, it's like you don't care about those things. That doesn't affect you. And I remember that we would all be hugging Leonor, and she had the best laugh, and she was so funny. And every time I saw her, I was like, how can this girl be so courageous and so brave, and always have a smile on her face despite all of her suffering? And that is just God that was just God working in Leonor's life. So I always remember Leonor, and she's always been an inspiration to me. And the other lesson that I have learned is that disability ministry gives the opportunity to know and to love God. And I'm also reminded of 1 John 4, verses 7 and 8, that says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. So I love this verse because we tend to think that, oh, we love our brothers and sisters. And God even tells us to love our enemies. But I think that you don't know what love is until you have someone with a disability that you can love and that you can feel how much they love you. Those of us who do disability ministry, I think that we receive more hugs and more love than any other person. And it's just amazing to do this. And that is why I'm so passionate about this, because you can really feel the love of God bursting through these people. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity that God is giving me to be able to do this. And I remember that someone, when I was doing a presentation, someone, when we were in the Q&A, someone asked me, Claudia, would you have preferred to have never had an accident? And that kind of caught me by surprise. No one had ever asked me that. I was like, wow. I mean, would I have preferred to have a normal, or what we consider normal life without a disability? Or would I have wanted to have an accident like the one I did? And my answer was, I mean, it's not like I would have wanted to have an accident. I mean, nobody wants to have an accident, or no one wants or desires to have a disability. But when I see now the purpose and what God has been doing for 35 years in my life, after acquiring a disability, now I can say that I am grateful, and I can finally say that I am grateful for what God has been doing during these 35 years of life. Yes, in the midst of, despite my suffering and my pain and my disability, my quadriplegia, but that's just the instrument that God uses in order for me to be able to do this disability ministry in El Salvador. And that helps me to also bring other people, like the volunteers, the leaders, and the pastors, to come alongside me to be able to touch the lives of people with disabilities and to transform their lives, but most importantly, to show them the way and to share the message of hope and salvation of Jesus Christ. So you're probably wondering what happened with Daniela. So let me share with you the rest of the video, and you will see how Daniela's life and her family has been impacted by the work that we're doing here at Joni and Friends in El Salvador.
With families like Daniela's in mind, Joni and Friends launched its first international disability center here in El Salvador to provide complete Christ-centered care to those most in need. For the Guzmans, Joni's house is a place where Daniela can receive physical therapy on a regular basis, free of charge.
The treatment here in Johnny's house is different because everyone is nicer than in other institutions.
Pues las terapias que ella
The therapies Daniela will receive will be very helpful because she's currently not getting any.
It's also a place where Lorena and Luis find spiritual counsel and encouragement.
The experience with Pastor David was really nice. He talked to me about God and how great He is to us.
Pues fíjese que con la hermana Miriam
With Miriam, we talk about my family.
Que Dios sabe cómo lleva
As she told me, God knows all the tests you are going through as a family.
como familia. Como ella me dice,
And she told me about following the Word of God in order to know God more.
Since we found Johnny's house, our lives have changed. We've received help here that other institutions couldn't offer.
At Joni's house, Daniela and her family find hope, dignity, and a place of belonging. Instead of being bullied and rejected by her community, Daniela is treated with love and acceptance. Johnny's House is a safe haven for the weak and weary, for the isolated and forgotten. Through Johnny's House, we are transforming how communities view disability, one heart, one city, and one country at a time.
So as you can see, now Daniela is a happy girl. She knows that she is loved. She knows that we care for her, that she has a seat at the table, and that she belongs. But there are other thousands of people with disabilities who are still forgotten, who still live in dark bedrooms where no one visits them. So what do we have to do? We have to go out and get them and bring them into the light and love them and show them that God loves them, that there is a purpose in their disability, and that they also belong. So, what have I learned after all of these years of doing disability ministry? I know that we can be a blessing in the lives of these people, but most of all, I know that we will be the ones blessed. Thank you.